So this piece started off as a prompt from a writer who wrote, "Write a story about a Filipino man who lost his high-paying corporate job and then started his own successful business in the US. What is the significance of the Filipino perspective in this?" Interesting question. I'll get to that in a minute. The first thing I did was look up what the word bamboo means. It's a common enough word in English, but I wanted to make sure I understood the nuance, right? In this case, it describes someone who is very passive. A bamboozled person is one who has been fooled or confused. The word resonated with me because growing up, I always saw myself as proactive, driven. But perhaps to others I appeared passive, compliant. Maybe that's why I kept climbing the corporate ladder for so long, because I believed that someday I would reach the top and finally be seen. But that didn't happen. In 2020, I lost my job as the chief marketing officer of a billion-dollar company. It happened during a Zoom call. I was in Sydney at the time. The CEO told me the company was going in a different direction, a younger executive with fresh ideas. There were legal restrictions on what he could say and what he had to say, but it was clear what he meant. He was letting me go. I had no choice but to accept it. I was angry, resentful, humiliated. I'd worked for the company for 17 years. I was loyal. Now I was being pushed out. My husband and I decided to move back to New York City. We emptied our lives into storage containers and moved. Back in New York, I started coaching other executives. I helped them craft narratives about themselves to attract headhunters and secure jobs. But there were days when I couldn't even face my computer. As I scrolled through social media, I saw my former colleagues posting pictures of their fancy dinners together. It was like a secret language I could no longer understand. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and think, how am I going to pay the bills? Then I'd hear my husband breathing beside me and imagine him taking care of me if I got sick, or if, God forbid, I lose my sight. I was lucky in that I had enough savings to live for quite some time. So I decided to use that freedom to experiment. I traveled, I tried new hobbies, I took classes, everything from photography to pottery to ballroom dancing. I also spent more time volunteering with causes I cared about. I became an advocate for people living with disabilities. And it was during that time that I learned how to listen to myself again. I discovered that I wanted to use my voice to write. I started journaling, writing down memories, family stories, and thoughts that bounced around my brain. That turned into a series of essays and then a book proposal. And a year later, my memoir came out. The thing is, had I been working full-time, I wouldn't have had the time to do any of that. I wouldn't have found my voice as a writer. When I think back to that time, I don't regret losing my job. I realize now that sometimes we need to lose everything to find ourselves. I think that's what happens to the character in the essay as well. He loses his job, and then in the process of trying to recover financially, he regains something much more important, his sense of self. Now, as to why the Filipino perspective is significant, well, there are a couple of reasons. First, immigrants often carry a deep sense of insecurity. Will you be accepted in your adopted country? Will you ever truly belong? This leads many to play it safe, to pursue stable jobs and careers, to follow paths laid out by their parents and society. The essay explores that journey and the challenges faced along the way. Second, Filipinos are known for their resilience, adaptability, and optimism. These traits enable the character to bounce back from adversity. Despite the setbacks, he remains hopeful and determined. He finds strength in his heritage and uses it to fuel his comeback. Finally, the story touches upon the immigrant experience, specifically the sacrifices made by parents for their children. When my parents came to America, they left behind their families, their culture, and most of their possessions to give their kids a better life. This story pays tribute to that sacrifice and highlights the impact it can have on succeeding generations. It also shows how important it is to stay true to oneself, to not compromise your values or abandon what makes you unique in pursuit of success. Success isn't just about financial gain, but also about personal fulfillment. Let's talk a bit about the essay itself. It's actually an incredible example of narrative nonfiction. The author has carefully constructed a story with a clear beginning, rising action, climax, and resolution. The story is engaging and emotionally resonant, which is a hallmark of great narrative nonfiction. Additionally, the essay exhibits masterful use of sensory details. The author paints vivid pictures with words, allowing the reader to experience the story alongside the protagonist. For instance, the opening lines immediately immerse us in the setting and establish a somber tone. The sky was the same dull gray it always was in early spring, the lake still wearing its thin sheet of ice. The apt use of figurative language further enhances the piece. The phrase dull gray sets the stage for the emotional landscape of the story, and the personification of the lake as wearing a sheet of ice adds a layer of depth. It's not just ice on the lake, it's as if the lake itself is burdened by a covering. This mirrors the protagonist's emotional state, the weight of his circumstances pressing down on him. That said, I'm not entirely convinced about the ending. While it's satisfying in terms of the protagonist's personal growth, I believe it could benefit from a stronger connection to the opening. The story begins with such a strong sense of place and time that I would have liked to see that thread woven more tightly through the narrative. As it stands, the ending feels somewhat tacked on. The story takes a turn from the personal to the professional, and the setting shifts from Chicago to San Francisco. While these changes are understandable in terms of the plot, they disrupt the story's flow and diminish the impact of the narrative. Personally, I'd have preferred to see the story end with the protagonist returning to Chicago, demonstrating his growth within the context of his original environment. This would have tied the story together more neatly and left readers with a more profound sense of the protagonist's journey. If you enjoyed this essay and want to support the channel, consider tipping us with a coffee. Until next time, keep listening and make sure you subscribe for more. When the year began, I had no plans to write a book. I was building a tech startup and every waking hour was spent on that. I was so focused on my goals that I didn't pay much attention to what was happening around me. I lived on caffeine, creativity, and whimsy. I worked 18-hour days and slept 3 hours a night. I was running on fumes and fear and having the time of my life. The months after Pivot Line's launch blur into a restless summer. Investors keep calling, emails arrive faster than I can read them, and I'm running on a steady drip of adrenaline and coffee. For the first time in years, my calendar belongs entirely to me. Yet every square on it is full. I tell myself this is freedom. Some nights, though, I stare out the window of my small Chicago office and wonder if Ivy simply built another cage, one of my own design. I hire 2 more developers, both brilliant recent grads who remind me of my younger self, hungry, idealistic, ready to work until sunrise for a dream. We move from a co-working space into a converted loft with brick walls and creaky floors that smell faintly of roasted coffee beans from the cafe downstairs. I love the sound of our keyboards echoing late at night. It feels like the heartbeat of something alive. The press starts calling Pivot Line the next big thing in remote productivity. Articles appear in TechCrunch and Wired. My parents clip each one like proud archivists and send photos of the clippings to our extended family in Manila. They call every Sunday morning, their voices bright with pride. My father repeats the same phrase in Tagalog. Kayang-kaya mo, you can handle it. I want to believe him. Old coworkers who never returned my texts suddenly want to grab coffee. Former managers hint at collaboration opportunities. Even the HR director who delivered my layoff tries to connect on LinkedIn. I accept the request but keep my distance. I'm polite, even gracious, but I never forget the day they told me I wasn't needed. Yet for all the accolades, a quiet emptiness creeps in. My days revolve around product updates and investor calls, but nights are silent. The friends I once met for late-night diner runs have drifted to new cities or new families. Dating feels impossible. Every attempt ends with a canceled dinner because of a last-minute pitch or deployment. I tell myself this is temporary, that I'll find balance once the company stabilizes. An email arrives in August from a major West Coast venture fund inviting me to present at their founders' summit in Los Angeles. It's the kind of event that can catapult a startup from promising to unstoppable. I accept immediately, then spend weeks refining my pitch until I can deliver it in my sleep. The summit is held in a glass tower overlooking downtown LA, all shimmering windows and carefully staged greenery. The crowd is a swirl of designer sneakers and million-dollar ideas. I speak for 20 minutes describing how Pivot Line helps distributed teams move like a single organism. When I finish, the room erupts in applause. Investors line up with business cards, their eyes bright with calculation. Later that night at the rooftop reception, I step away from the noise to watch the city lights. The skyline reminds me of Manila. Dense, vibrant, restless. I think of my parents again, of the journey that brought them across an ocean and eventually brought me here. For a moment, I feel perfectly aligned with the dreams they carried. Then my phone buzzes. A message from an unknown number reads, "We should talk. It's about Vantage Tech." My chest tightens. I almost delete it, but curiosity wins. The sender is an engineer I once mentored, now working inside the company that discarded me. We meet the next morning at a quiet cafe. He tells me Vantage Tech's leadership is struggling. Their new project, the one that replaced my department, has stalled. They're losing clients. They want to license Pivot Line to save themselves. The idea of Vantage Tech paying for the very product I built after they fired me is intoxicating. But I keep my face neutral. "Tell them to email my legal team," I say. Inside, a small ember of satisfaction burns brighter. Negotiations stretch for weeks. My lawyers handle most of it, but the irony isn't a tea lost on me. The company that once treated me as expendable now treats me as indispensable. When the deal finally closes, Pivot Line gains not only a major client, but also a public partnership that boosts our reputation overnight. Headlines call it a surprising alliance. I call it closure. Still, victory doesn't erase loneliness. I start volunteering at a local community center that mentors immigrant teens interested in tech. Teaching them basic coding feels like breathing fresh air after months of high-stakes meetings. They remind me of my younger self, wide-eyed, eager, unbroken by corporate politics. One quiet evening after class, a 16-year-old named Carlo asks how I stayed motivated when people doubted me. I tell him the truth. I didn't always. Some days I wanted to quit. What mattered was showing up anyway. As autumn settles over Chicago, I finally slow down. I walk the lakefront without checking emails, let the cold wind bite my cheeks, and remember that life isn't just a series of victories to collect. It is also the quiet moments no one writes about, the smell of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor, the way city lights ripple on the water, the sound of a friend's laughter through a phone call. On Thanksgiving, I fly to Nevada to spend a week with my parents. My mother cooks adobo that fills the house with garlic and vinegar. My father insists on a toast, to hard work, to family, to never letting setbacks define us. We sit long after dinner, swapping stories of Manila, of Chicago, of the strange roads that brought us here. I realize that revenge was never the point. The real triumph is standing here with them, whole and unbowed. When I return to Chicago, I step into the loft office and breathe in the familiar scent of brick dust and coffee. The servers hum softly, a reminder of the product that started as a scribble in a notebook. I think about the layoff again, about the pain and anger that once consumed me. Those feelings have faded, replaced by something steadier. Pride, yes, but also gratitude. Losing that job forced me to build a life on my own terms. The city outside is wrapped in winter again, streets glittering with frost. I close my laptop and watch the snow fall through the tall windows. Somewhere inside me, a quiet voice whispers that this is only the beginning. And for the first time in a long while, I believe it. I know everyone loves a good revenge story, but it's important to remember that not all stories have to be about revenge. Sometimes life simply takes unexpected turns. When I got laid off, I felt angry and uncertain about the future, but those difficult emotions pushed me to take risks I wouldn't have taken otherwise. I started writing a book, Pivot, which became a huge success. I poured my heart and soul into that story. I wrote day and night, fueled by my determination to succeed. And somehow, in the midst of all that hard work, I found happiness. That may not be the revenge story you were expecting, but for me, it's the truth. Life isn't always fair, but sometimes the unexpected turns end up leading you exactly where you need to be. If you like this video, please show your support. Thank you for watching.